2-minute introduction. 2 minutes will be allocated for each question. The candidates will rotate their order. The rebuttals, these little purple things that you're going to see them hand us, are for adding on 1 minute to their own time, or they can rebut the other person's response. So they have a choice, and they have 10 of those. They have a 3-minute closing, and the rebuttal card cannot be used on opening or the closing statement. They're going to get a yellow card for a 30-second warning from Michelle, who's sitting in the front, who did a fabulous job for the first candidate one, so thank you, Michelle. And then they'll get a red card when time is up. Are there any questions from the candidates before we get started?
No, thanks.
We're good to go? Okay. Question number 1, and we're going to start with the introduction.
Opening
Oh,
statement.
I'm sorry, opening statement. We're going to start with you.
Thank you so much, Janine. Thank you to the Lakewood Village Neighborhood Association for holding this debate today. I am very excited to be here. I'm a lifelong Long Beach resident. I've known residents of Lakewood Village my whole life, which is one of the great neighborhoods in this city. Such a wonderful place to grow up, to live your life, to raise a family. And it's the kind of place that we want to keep the village. We want to keep this the kind of wonderful place that people want to live in, put roots in, have generation after generation be able to stay here. And that's what I'm fighting for in this city. I'm fighting to have this city be the kind of city that's going to be accountable to residents, that's going to listen to our needs, that's not going to be controlled by big, powerful interests downtown. I am, in addition to being a lifelong third-generation resident, I'm a small business owner. 4 years ago, I founded the Long Beach Reform Coalition. Our entire purpose is government accountability and transparency, so we don't see the kind of things happening in Long Beach, and they increasingly are, which have exploded on the political scene in Los Angeles. We've seen this horrible scandal happening where the veil has been ripped from concealing what really goes on in the back rooms of politics. It's so disappointing. It's so disappointing, but it's not surprising to many of us. And unfortunately, what went on in that room controls the money which is behind so many of the races in this city, including, I am sorry to say, my opponent's race. This is important and it has to be said, but you know what? I am running because I feel deeply that the citizens, the residents of this city can dig deep within themselves. They can see past all the misleading money which is emanating from these special interest groups everywhere, from downtown LA to downtown Long Beach, which are trying to manipulate them. And they can see it in themselves to take back this city and get us back on course to a city that truly cares and values its residents.
Good evening, everyone. As always, it is good to be with you to share the vision of our shared 5th District and our greater Long Beach community. We've done this a lot, so a lot of you know the details of my life, of our lives here. And it was great to listen to our mayoral candidates share their visions tonight as well. So thank you to Lakewood Village for having us tonight. My name's Megan.
It's on top.
It's on the bottom. They put it up.
Oh.
Perfect. Make sure that's up.
Okay, sorry, we'll start. I don't know if we'll start again. We'll see.
Extra time.
Well, yeah, I stopped it.
Thank you. So again, thank you for having us to share the vision of the future. My name's Megan. I'm a lifelong resident of District 5. I'm a wife, I'm a mom to 3 amazing kids who are all here tonight. And that matters when we talk about who's supporting blood relatives. Because I'm a mom, because I'm a wife, it changes my perspective on leadership. It changes how I see the world. It changes how I grew up in this city and how I want my kids to continue to live in this city as adults. I'm a volunteer in my community since I was a teenager, starting with a homeless breakfast that I started at St. Barnabas Church. I was a domestic violence volunteer with Sukasa, a hospice volunteer with Pathways, and a Miller Children's volunteer in the Child Life Department. I was a nonprofit board member for Alexandria House, which was transitional housing for women and children in the Mid-Wilshire area in LA for 8 years. I'm currently a nonprofit board member for 2 Long Beach nonprofits, including the Rancho Los Cerritos Historic Site and the California Conference for Equality and Justice. And I am a 2-term elected school board member to Long Beach Unified School District, currently representing 108,000 constituents in the Los Cerritos, Cal Heights, Bixby Knolls, and North Long Beach community, and I'm very proud to represent them. I'm running for City Council to continue this work of service that has been the work of my life in this city. To talk about housing and homelessness issues, to talk about public safety, feeling safe in our streets, to talk about infrastructure, to talk about many of the things that the mayoral candidates talked about earlier. And I'm here to talk to you tonight to be in conversation. But I'm running because I want to continue to serve. That is who I've always been in this community, and it's who I look forward to being as your next councilwoman in District 5. Thank you.
How do you prioritize projects that were funded by Measure A to ensure that they are completed quickly and effectively? We're going to start with Ms. Kerr.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciated the robust conversation that the mayoral candidates had around Measure A, and how it hasn't lived up to the promises, but that is continuing to do work. Both of them acknowledge that there is a great plan in place for the next 5 years for those Measure A funding. And Councilwoman Price even talked about the oversight committee that is required by law to make sure those dollars are being spent. I support Measure A. My opponent, his job downtown, is a political consultant who worked to oppose Measure A, the thing that funds park safety, infrastructure, and public safety. So I support the work. I sat texting, asking you to give a little bit more so that our city could benefit from the work of Measure A. Absolutely, it hasn't lived up to the promise yet, but we're getting there, and we've had issues. I will continue to support it. I think the last thing that we need to do right now in the face of the calls for increased public safety, better infrastructure, more and well-maintained parks, is to fight against and cut funding that goes to those things.
Well, I could, this is the same question for me, right? I could go on all night about Measure A. I won't do that. First of all, I need to say it's not true what my opponent said. I was a volunteer running the campaign against Measure A. Now, what is true is I oppose Measure A, and I still oppose Measure A, because Measure A has been a massive shell game in this city. It has been so dishonest. So when it was first brought to the voters in 2016, all the special interests in town who knew that they were going to profit from Measure A and get most of the money, they funded the campaign to pass Measure A. And they sent out 20 mailers citywide. It was one of the most dishonest campaigns I've ever seen in the history of this city. In not one mailer did it say you're voting for a tax. It used the word revenue in every single mailer. And it promised the world. They sent out mailers saying we're down 200 officers. Vote for Measure A. Did we get the 200 officers? No. It was just not honest. But what it was when it was passed, it was the highest sales tax in America. It tied us with Chicago to be the highest sales tax. And you cannot say that you support working people, but you support the most punitive tax on working people, the most regressive imaginable tax, a tax on basic goods and necessities. And now we're here in this hyperinflationary environment where not only are customers struggling to pay this tax, but you have retailers, you have bars, restaurants that have this tiny margin, and you put a 1% tax on top of it. Now, with all that considered, it might be okay in Long Beach to have the Measure A tax if we were actually getting a return on that dollar. If we were actually investing that money in our parks and our streets. But it was reported in the Long Beach Post, $75 million of Measure A's current year budget projection, over $75 million of Measure A revenue, just $1.5 million to streets, and I'm going to keep going. It's a joke. So what they don't do in Long Beach is they don't literally lie. They don't spend zero. They just spend a little bit, and then most of the money goes to pay back the special interests who fund politics in this city. That's the system we need to break up. That's what's fundamentally wrong with the status quo in the city, and that's why we have now, before Measure A, we had $400 million backlog in street repair. Now, after Measure A, do we have $100 million? No, we have $1.7 billion. That's what goes on in this city. So we need to get our priorities straight. We need to start actually spending the money that we generate from Measure A on the street maintenance, on the parks, on the infrastructure, and not having it go into pockets downtown. That is the fundamental problem. So we do have Measure A, but we need to get honest about it. We need to stop just labeling things Measure A when that money. Thank you.
And we have no time.
So for those of you who are in the room for the mayoral candidate, I look forward as your next councilwoman to working with whomever wins the mayor's race, and their commitment to infrastructure and the commitment to the 5-year plan that both of them agreed to and laid out and acknowledged. I'm grateful for Measure A. I'm grateful for the $400,000 to Cherry Park, $320 to the Hartwell Park turf field, $1 million to Los Cerritos Park, an additional $100,000 for a sports complex there, or sport court there, $1 million to Rancho Los Cerritos, $100,000 to the Dana Branch Library, $288,000 to the Expo Center, which is an incredible community gathering space here in District 5, over $6 million for the rebuild of Fire Station 9, and $67,000 to the Ruth Block Library, not to mention all of the roads. So it is important to me that we continue to do that work with the oversight that was intended by the measure and the oversight committee that is in place.
So one of the big issues here is when you have somebody running for office who just parrots the talking points from City Hall. City Hall is not known for its honesty. It is known for creating optics for the public, to make the public think everything is going just fine. But what happens is there's a lot of nonsense that's pervaded, and you need somebody who's going to dig deeper. Now, I did that. I've been doing that for years. In fact, even before I founded the Long Beach Reform Coalition, when Measure A was first passed, I joined a working group that was put together by George Economides of the Business Journal to investigate whether the Measure A money was really being spent as intended. And we tried to get the documents from them. We tried to get the capital improvements budget. And they stumbled. They even stumbled George Economides, who was a legendary journalist in this city. So what happened is, there was already spending on infrastructure before Measure A. There was always an infrastructure budget. There were some years after Measure A that went down, not up. But we just labeled all the projects we already had paid for by Measure A. So that list you get here is not honest.
Okay, next question. What changes could be made with our policing strategies that will enhance public safety in the city? And Ian goes first.
There's a lot we need to do in terms of changing policing in the city. Fundamentally, to get the money to do the things we need, and again, it's not a gift. You know, these are our tax dollars. So these projects that get rattled off, it's our money. These are not gifts to us. We're paying for all of this. And the problem is, too much of our money is going into these special interest pockets. So the first thing we need to do is a top-to-bottom audit of City Hall and performance review. We did this 10 years ago with Management Partners Incorporated. They ignored the results. We need to stop getting the waste. We need to get back that wasteful money, that corrupt money. And then when we have enough money, we can get back to what we used to have in the city. We used to have over 1,100 police officers. So don't tell me we can't hire police in this city. We have over 1,100 officers. Officially now, according to the chief, we have 740. And you talk to officers, functionally, it's more like 600 available. And I did a ride-along. I think I actually got them to bring back the ride-along program because I was so insistent I wanted to do a ride-along. They had a mothball during COVID for 2.5 years. And I hung out with this officer, great guy. But he told me that we only have one patrol per beat. That's 10,000 residents. So if you're one of the other 9,999 residents, and one more thing goes wrong, you're going to be waiting a long time. You're going to be waiting too long for it to matter. So we need to invest in our police. We need to have a force that's, we need to have a force that is sufficient so that we can get to the community-oriented policing model. That's the Bill Bratton model where officers actually have time. They're not just going 911 all the time. They can actually get out of their cars. They can walk the beat. They can get to know people. They can be proactive. They can get get to know the hot spots out there, what's going on in the community. And then maybe we can forestall this total raft of smashings on Atlantic. We also need to have the proper police oversight because we've spent tens of millions of dollars in these settlements for officer-involved shootings. And that's good for the officers because most of our officers are fantastic, just some of the best people. But you need to have basic oversight. You need to have a strong, we have this proposal of a director of inspector general type overseer, but that person needs to actually be empowered by the city manager. And we need to upgrade technology. One of the things I noticed on my ride-along was the officer was having to go all the way back to the North Division substation in Sheriff Park to fill out his report on the terminals there after every single call. What a tremendous waste of time to not have something in the car where he could do that. So there's a lot we can do to actually get efficient in the city and improve public safety.
Could you just clarify the question one more time? Because I know it had to do with community relations.
What changes can be made with our policing strategies that will enhance public safety?
Great. Thank you so much. We have work to do in this city. There isn't anyone who doesn't believe that. The trends are going in a direction that none of us want to see. The chief admits that himself and talks about the strategies that he's putting in place. Having a new police chief is a great opportunity, a new mayor, a new council, to continue to be inventive and creative with the work. So we've had community policing models. We've had police officers in the 5th District on Segways, on bikes. They're doing walks in North Long Beach that have been expanded. And that engagement with our law enforcement officers is critical to building trust. And we need to do that. I was on the Civil Service Commission in the city, another one of my ways that I've chosen to serve the community. And so I know the situations, some of them, that have not gone well. We have work to do with training. We have work to do with accountability. And I believe we have a police chief and a department that's committed to doing that moving forward. I'm proud to have the support of the Police Officers Association. So when we talk about different endorsements or groups that are bringing, those aren't given out. Those are requested. Those are those agencies working with people, questioning folks and deciding who they think can help bring a vision forward. The police officers in Long Beach are supporting me. They want to work with me to do the work of enhanced community policing. They want to do the work of what's next for a 21st century law enforcement agency. Councilwoman Price mentioned it, and potentially Vice Mayor Richardson did as well. We're down on police officers. It's hard to find police officers. There are some cities in the Inland Empire giving a $50,000 bonus for someone who wants to leave LVPD and go be in another department. So we can't make police officers appear. We have to fully fund at least 2 more academies so that we, hopefully 2 years from now, can fill, as Councilmember Price said, the vacated positions.
So I want a council person who's going to be honest. I want someone who's going to tell me the truth and not say to my face something that I know is not true. We know we do not have community policing in this city. We don't have anything close to the resources. And what you hear at the City Hall constantly, and yes, the City Hall special interests, people say I'm supported by the police or the firefighters. Well, that's not the actual police. That's a few people in a room, right, who are part of a union. And it's part of the downtown political machine. They all flock towards somebody that talks and toes the line. We need somebody who's going to say, wait a second, we have 1,100 police officers in the city, we can't do it. All you hear from City Hall is can't do. They're paid $100,000 to start. You don't even have to have a high school diploma, a college degree. You actually need more training to become a cosmetologist than is required to become a police officer in Long Beach. So I think we got great cops, but I think we should have actually higher standards. And I know that we could attract cops if we really went out and recruited. Because it's a great job, it's a great community, And if we actually supported them politically, if we gave them the resources and the technology, we made it so that they're not having to work 22-hour shifts on this extreme overtime. That's why the canine unit, Ozzy, died in the car. You know, when people are that exhausted, how are they going to make life and death hair-trigger decisions? This is a dysfunctional system in the city, and if we have somebody who is just constantly an apologist for the status quo, we are never going to move forward.
What will you do to foster healthy relationships between all Long Beach leaders and citizens, regardless of ethnicity or financial wealth?
Thank you, I appreciate that. It's a great reminder that I currently am on the Board of Education for the Long Beach Unified School District, the 4th largest school district in the state of California, the largest employer in the city and the largest landholder in the city, representing 108,000 people across districts 5, 8, and 9. There is no more diverse set of folks in this city than the folks that I represent currently on the school board. So from Los Cerritos and Cal Heights, to our public housing at Carmelitos, to our most northern boundaries at 72nd, so at the Compton and Paramount borders. The work that I've done over the last 8 years has been about building community. It has been giving voice to families who may not have had a voice in our educational system before. It is being present in community meetings. It is being present on school sites, talking to parents, talking to stakeholders. It's the hard work of being present to someone, listening, getting resources, not always agreeing, but building relationships. It is the work of my life in this city, and I have a proven track record of continuing to do that. So District 5, this new district that runs river to river with the airport asset in the middle, it's about bringing people together. I think in the last forum, I think my opponent even said that people in the city don't care about being together. And we know that that's fundamentally untrue. We know the magic of Long Beach is how connected we are to each other, irrespective of the neighborhood that we're in. Because when we encounter people in different parts of the city, we have a connection through a nonprofit, through a school, through family ties. And so I have a track record of building relationships with folks around the region, and I will continue to do that as your next councilwoman.
Actually, what I said is, of course people want to be together. No matter how many times my opponent wants to misrepresent my words, of course people want to be together. They want to be brought together by a city that actually cares about them and not downtown special interests, not people who look at City Hall as this giant piggy bank, and so all their money, all their hard-earned tax dollars gets diverted down there instead of fixing their streets, fixing their parks and their playgrounds, and they get a few things labeled Measure A, brought to you by Measure A. But they can just look at their streets. They're falling apart. They can look at the articles, how half the trees in the parks are dying. You know, we're denuding the city of trees. These are the basic things that people need to come together. But frankly, if you care so much about equality, why didn't you call on Ron Herrera to resign when you had the opportunity? Ron Herrera, who was part of that horrible phone call, that leak tape in LA, that vicious, racist phone call. And he runs the he ran the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor. He has dropped $25,000 in this race, and that's just the opening volley for people paid to pretend to be your neighbors, to knock on your doors and tell you to vote for my opponent and Rex Richardson for mayor, who's also their candidate. Why did you not call on him to resign immediately? That's what I want to know. And why did you not call out the fact that there were anti-Jewish remarks and anti-Armenian? I noted in your tweet, you said there were anti-black and indigenous. But this is the hallmark of somebody who is a machine politician who doesn't have the courage to stand up for the values that she claims to represent, unfortunately.
I've been doing the work of racial justice and equity in this community for a really long time. I currently am the chair-elect for the California Conference for Equality and Justice, which is the grandchild of the National Conference of Christians and Jews. I've been on that board for 5 years, doing the work, supporting businesses who are doing the work, classrooms, building bridges camps that maybe some of you in this room attended, that do that racial justice and that human relations work. So I have been doing that work for 5 years and continue to do that work. And those two people who are knocking on doors, telling you about me and giving you information so you have information to vote, are Cal State Long Beach students who at first volunteered and we said deserve to be paid for their time because students have to pay bills too. They have to pay rent too. So yes, I have 2 young people walking around town whom I've met with, giving you information about me because young people deserve to be respected and paid for their work.
They may have been recruited from LVCC, but the Federation of Labor has been astroturfing these races for years. They pay people to knock on doors because they support candidates who signal to them that they're going to be compliant, that they're going to be political machine candidates, and it's much harder for those kind of candidates to get grassroots community support. So that's why they have to pay people to go out there. This is a system that's been in place for a long time, and it's basically the LA interests trying to take over Long Beach and politically colonize us and add us to their power base. You know, Megan, you're for equality, but that was one of the most horrific phone calls in the history of Southern California politics. I'm a Jewish person, and they referred to Judeos, the Judeos. They referred to Armenians. You didn't have one word to say about any of this. This was your test, and frankly, I think you failed it.
It's a tweet. We're back to talking about tweets.
What was your only statement?
I made a statement to the Long Beach Post, which they chose not to use in their story, actually. So that's on them. You can't just... I do the work. I have a track record. I show up. CCJ, I wrote a tweet early in the day when more details continued to be revealed and more people in the labor movement and in LA politics, I don't know any of those people personally, have called for accountability from their own community. The rest of my statement was we stand with the people who are calling for accountability in the moment. We stand with the people who are calling for accountability. Those were labor people, and those were people in Los Angeles who are represented by those folks. So if we're going to talk about my tweet, let's at least talk about the whole thing.
I am indeed talking about the whole thing. That was the beginning and end of your tweet. That was your public statement. You had the opportunity to stand up to your money, Ron Herrera, the guy who was the financial foundation of your campaign and other campaigns in this city. And you had the opportunity to call on him to resign. To say, you know what, being part of a conversation in your headquarters where the African-American son of an LA City Council person is referred to by a horrible Spanish word that means small monkey, is one of the most horrible things that could possibly happen. I want to disassociate myself with this person, with this organization, with this money. I want unions to disaffiliate with this organization. This is wrong. You did not take that opportunity. You said accountability, but there was no accountability in your statement.
Okay. Next question. Lakewood Village and other neighborhoods in the district are somewhat isolated from the city, especially City Hall in downtown Long Beach. What is your plan to communicate with constituents, foster dialogue throughout the district, and how will you ensure transparency in your engagement? And Ian goes first.
This is really central to our work at the Long Beach Reform Coalition. We have something called the Long Beach Reform Pledge, which I wrote, and one of the planks is that any candidate who signs it has to have at least 4 town hall meetings a year, but of course I would have far more than that. In fact, it's my intention not just to walk and knock on doors as a candidate. I want to keep knocking on doors. I love the conversations with ordinary people. It's so much more fun than when you go to these downtown interest groups that make these endorsements. They're just so creepy, and they're so controlled by this whole clubby little machine atmosphere downtown, where you just realize it's a stacked deck. It's not for the people. It's not for ordinary people who want to be an advocate. And what you realize is it's not that laundry list of endorsements. It's just one endorsement. So yes, I want to have actually a council office that's going to be in Lakewood Village. That's the most central point in the district. I want to constantly talk to people, and I want to have not only town hall meetings, but meetings in front of the issue. You know, if we have an issue with the bollards and the roundabouts, we did get Stacy out there for a meeting, but there was no follow-through, unfortunately. You know, we've got to be constantly talking to people so we don't get things like outside of the district. They had the Broadway road dive that just destroyed the entire corridor. They didn't talk to people beforehand. It's all about communication. If I bring nothing else to this, it's a willingness to devote my whole life to being an active, involved council member, talking to people every day.
I'll point to the fact that I have been doing the work for 8 years. Engaged on campuses, talking with parents, meeting with folks. That will continue. Stacy's got a great newsletter. Newsletters will continue. Being present in the community, having dinner and chatting with folks at a local brewery will be present. But yes, we have to do those more formal things like town halls. Invite me to your neighborhood association like they have done as a school board member. I will come, I will bring staff. But part of the work of getting that done and communicating is being able to help you understand what the city can do for you. And that means having a good relationship with city staff. So that when we do have town hall meetings and we do have conversations, that we're engaging with staff in a respectful way so that they want to come and be present. You know, Ian talks a lot about the Long Beach Reform Coalition and being transparent. The Long Beach Reform Coalition and him as principal officer were fined by the FPPC as late as 2019 for incorrect disclosures and failure to file 24-hour reports in a timely way. You can Google it, you can find it. It's there. So if we're going to talk about transparency, we're going to talk about the way you conduct elections, the way you conduct yourself while you're running for office. I did it in 2014 as a grassroots candidate, and I've continued to be transparent, accessible, and available to citizens who don't have kids in schools, to community members who do have kids in schools, to teachers, to classified staff, to principals. I show up at those meetings all of the time. So it's about continuing to engage in a respectful way, even showing up to places where you know the deck is stacked against you. Walking into rooms where you know people will boo, where they will jeer, and realize that we still have to do common work together. And so I will show up, and I will be respectful, and I will work every day, probably mostly full time, because that's what I've done with the school board, to be present and engaged and to represent District 5 as your next councilman.
Well, I agree about the part about being respectful. That is important, and anybody who knows me knows I am extremely respectful all the time because you don't get anywhere if you're not respectful to people. And I will respectfully reply to your accusation. The Long Beach Reform Coalition, like every political campaign organization out there, made an extremely small error. Actually, our treasurer had a fax machine that was set back the wrong date. So transmitted something to Sacramento, it was considered one day off, and there was also an issue with a 1-point wireframe that was supposed to go around the return address. That was the sum total of it. But the real issue here is you need somebody who is going to tell you the truth and is really going to be involved with the public. And everything I've heard about what you're saying, that you're always there for people, is not true. I mean, I've heard about the parents who were so upset about the elimination of the CIC program. And they could not get through to you at all. The parents who wanted to have the Safe Passage program at Colin Powell Elementary. And they actually had to come to the board meeting because the principal would talk to them. You said you would talk to them. And then they didn't get any of their calls or emails answered. There was no follow-through whatsoever. And of course, this issue in the city of the locker room at Wilson High School, where it's like mind-blowing. You're going to have an all-gender locker room and endanger the safety of these teenage girls, and the parents are up in arms. The coaches are up in arms. It was in the press telegram. The coaches are saying, you're going to have us just like locker room monitors all the time. We're not going to be able to do our job. And you were not willing to talk to the public. So it's been a huge issue there. And the entire frustration is that you weren't willing to even look at their plans, where they had plans for unisex changing rooms in the middle. You didn't want to hear it.
Yeah. What is your specific plan to address the increasing homeless population in our district and city? And we'll start with Ms. Cook.
Thank you. We've had homelessness issues in this city for as long as I can remember. Again, I was 18 years old and serving meals to folks experiencing homelessness who were living in Lincoln Park. I remember one time Mayor O'Neill, while we were doing that on one of our 2 Saturdays a month, was waiting for an event, and we asked her to come walk the line with us and to meet some of the people that we had met over the years in that service. So when people say that it hasn't been an issue, it has been an issue. And some of us have been working on this issue for decades. And I am that person. We have work to do, and some of it, and the most of it has to do with, we have to build places and recognize places, including potentially community hospital, that when we ask people 1 or 2 or 17 times to get service, because that's how long it takes to get a chronically homeless person sometimes to say yes, we have to have a space for them to get well. Right now, when they say yes, it's a minimum of a 2 to 3 week wait. So part of the solution on the most acute part is when someone's ready to accept services and come off the street, we have to have places for them to go. So that is building temporary places so people can get stable, can get the help that they need, the medications that they need to move into longer term housing. Housing someone is not putting them in a house. It is getting them stable and putting them in a transitional place and hopefully having permanent supportive housing for them. So we have to continue to build and provide all of those things to help the 2,600 people experiencing homelessness in Long Beach. But the challenge is we need to do more work upstream to prevent them from becoming homeless. Because while we may have gotten 175 people off the street last year, 300 fell into homelessness in that same time frame. So we have to tackle the homelessness issue at the acute level for the folks who are currently unhoused or living in their cars on our streets, as well as doing what we can to prevent people from becoming homeless to begin with.
I participated in the homeless count this February. I went out there with all the volunteers, a lot of city people. It was a great effort. But what you see when you're out there is that this is a heartbreaking crisis. This is sprawling all across the city. When I was coming of age in Long Beach, it was unthinkable that we would have a homelessness crisis. There were some homeless by the library. It was not a citywide issue in any way, and it certainly wasn't a Fifth District issue. And now it is, because we have basically allowed the problem to get worse and worse. And when you deal with people directly, and they tell you stories like the couple that I talked to at the Pavilions who had a tent, and it was a husband and wife who had made their way down to the multi-service center, which is incredibly anti-user friendly, the opposite of user friendly. It's not even accessible really by foot, and it has extremely limited hours, closing 4 o'clock Monday through Friday. And then you get there and it's so bureaucratic, you can't even get what you need. They knew about Project Mookie, they knew about the motel vouchers, and they waited there for hours and eventually threw up their hands and gave up. This is what's really going on today in Long Beach. If you talk to experts who work in the field like Christine Berry of Ashley's Homeless Fund and others, they will tell you that the homelessness bureaucracy is utterly dysfunctional. They shouldn't even be stuck in the multi-service center. They should be out in the field with tablets getting people the documents and things they need. But what they do is they just grab for grants. And so we have a $77 million budget. Only 2% is general fund money. It's all grant, federal, county, state, and they waste enormous amounts of money because they just want to grab the grant and get it out the door. Like the luxury inn that we just bought, and we're spending $21 million for 78 rooms. That is not going to solve our homeless crisis for thousands of people.
Start a nonprofit that operates in Hollywood called Housing Works. And they do permanent supportive housing services. They are the folks who go out to people to try and get them housed, who go out 10, 12, 15 times to get people to accept services. They're the people who take them to doctor's appointments once they get them in housing, who take them to get the documentation they need to be able to receive the services that they're entitled to. Those are some of the most compassionate, hardworking people I have ever met in my life. So when we continue to talk and demonize staff for the work that they are doing tirelessly every day, it does not build unity and it does not help solve the problem. The luxury inn is 78 rooms. That is 78 people who won't be on the street. It's a both and. We have so much work to do that if we continue to call out people for not doing it good enough, who's going to be left to do the work? And how do we make sure that we have the funds to pay them to do that?
Okay, next question. Why does the city always claim to be broke, and what will you do to ensure that the city operates with a balanced budget without any new taxes? And Ian goes first.
Well, I'm at a chit, so I'm going to go on a little bit about homelessness first. The $21 million for 78 rooms, that is inhumanity. When you get just 78, that's the most valuable money in the world. We're in the middle of a homelessness crisis, and you get just 78 rooms and you're paying $269,000 a room when you could get 1,000 tiny homes and services for that money, just because it's easier and you get a quicker photo op out of it. While people are dying every day on the street, that is inhumane. These are life and death issues we're dealing with in city local politics. And cost effectiveness is the difference between people living and dying frequently. So we can't just get glib about this and say, oh, it's this plus. It's not this plus. We're doing things right or we're doing them wrong, and we've got to start doing them right. And fundamentally, to do things right in the city, as I mentioned before, we need an audit. We need to weed out. We need to get somebody who's separate from the whole political constellation of the city, an outside firm with a national reputation, to come in and show us how we're wasting so much money on things that are inefficient, whether it's the Homeless Bureau, the police department, planning, or sweetheart deals where we're giving away tens of millions of dollars, like, the tax abatements on Ocean Boulevard, or giving away our community hospital, or, the Civic Center billion-dollar boondoggle that developers made a fortune off of. It's not like we don't have the resources in the city. We are a wealthy city. We have oil under the ground. We have a global port. We have a huge property tax base and even a utility tax. It's how is the money being used, and whose pockets is that money going into?
So I believe the question was around how do we ensure that we're being fiscally solvent as a city? Again, 8 years as a school board member, $1.4 billion budget, fourth largest school district in the state. The thing about school boards is we have to present a budget to the state that's a 3-year plan. We can't just show up and pass a budget and say, look, we paid our bills this year. We are required by state law to pass a budget that looks 2 years into the future and proves that we can pay our bills 3 years from now. So, the way that I look at budgets is in a 3-year projection. So how are we going to maintain the services and the promise of this council? We just had a very seemingly rosy budget approved by this current council. They spent a lot of money when we know that in the next couple of years, resources will be down. There was state legislation that will ensure that oil revenues are significantly down. Again, if you listen to the mayoral candidates earlier, they talked about the fact that, yes, we were an oil city. It is not our future. We have to wean ourselves off oil dollars quickly. So we do that by having council members who are looking at budgets critically and trying to preserve services as best we can for, again, these things that we say we want. Public safety, homeless services, infrastructure. We want all of the things. Budgets are like pie. Civil rights are not, but budgets are like pie. And so we have to be very careful moving forward in the next couple of years in how we live up to the promises that were made back in September. I'm the only one in this race who's had to sign a public budget, to turn it in, to make hard choices, to work with staff and stakeholders to make cuts that aren't great, but necessary for the budget with the least amount of impact. That is the road this city is headed on in the next couple of years, and most cities are headed on in the next couple of years, and I have the experience to do it.
A robust business climate benefits the city's citizens and the city. What will you do to foster healthy business relationships? We're going to start with Ms. Turner.
I'm sorry, with me?
Yes.
Thank you. Our businesses, large and small, are the heart of who we are in Long Beach. They are the key to the recovery that we are currently having in the city. And so we are responsible as city, and I've never worked for the city, but staff needs to be responsible for making that as easy as possible. So talking to business owners who during the pandemic were trying to open a business but couldn't get anybody to come out and inspect, that was a real thing. We were down 40% of staff during the pandemic. So you had daring entrepreneurs who were putting it all on the line, who didn't get the support they needed from the staff. So we have to make sure that our business development and economic development staffs are fully funded, and while they're funded, they have to be fully staffed. There's a crisis everywhere with staffing, and we have to make sure that the departments that support economic development are the ones that we prioritize to make sure that they are staffed. We know we have a business improvement district, one here in D5, but that business improvement district can't do it all. They need the support of city staff. And so we need to make sure that we are putting the resources in place, that our economic development, we just hired a new economic development director. Look forward to working with him. I think he's coming from Colorado, to make sure that as we're bringing in new businesses in the Goodman property on Cherry, or the new businesses at Douglas Park, that we are bringing in businesses that are supportive of community, that know who we are here in Long Beach, and that are going to uplift and bring positives to our community. So as a council person, I want to have a business liaison officer in my staff. I want someone who's finding out. I was actually just having breakfast at the Crooked Duck and talking to Joey about he's looking at possible expansion into a second location, but he hadn't heard back from the city. And I made a note. I said, when I am a councilwoman, these are the kinds of things that I want to do. I want to hear that from a restaurateur when I'm sitting there having breakfast, and I want to be able to help solve the problem, because that's what business owners need. They need someone who is committed to doing the wonky work of finding out how to solve their problems.
The status quo in the city is terrible for business. We have one of the worst anti-business reputations in the region. I mean, it goes back a long ways. It's why the big businesses that would have generated a lot of tax receipts for us, they all moved to places like Signal Hill. We used to have car dealerships. They moved to Cerritos. Even the Home Depots, have you noticed? They're just on the Signal Hill side of the line. I mean, this is what's been going on in the city for a long time, but it's nowhere worse than around the small business, where we treat small business just like it doesn't matter whether you live or die. And we have so many businesses that have gone out of business recently in the 5th District, and they don't get any support. I mean, you'd think a city that cares about small business would at least say, okay, we have this, horribly high punitive measure of a sales tax, which is crushing your margin, and we're just coming out of a pandemic. We're in a hyperinflationary period. Let's at least do a moratorium on that sales tax until you get back on your feet. It doesn't even cross their minds. You try to open a business in this city, and it takes 6 months to get an inspector out for the things that you need to open up. In Bixby Knolls, they have the help of the Business Association, but other places don't. And that's why I have proposed a strategic plan so that we support the business associations that are facing this financial cliff with the running out of the RDA money, and they don't know what they're going to do. And then there's the other corridors that don't even have a business association. In Lakewood, we've got Norseway, which is great. Viking Way could use one. I stopped by and I talked to the new Long Beach Grocery Co-op there, which is fantastic. But they could use the support of a business association. So we need to just change the attitude in this city. The big business gets whatever they want. And that's great. You know, I love the Space Beach Industries that are coming in the center of this district. But the small businesses are the heart and soul. Every single dollar that goes into those businesses goes right back into the community, whether it's the profits for the owners or the employees' salaries.
You know, I keep hearing this echo about how bad our city employees are doing. Everybody's doing everything wrong. It's nice to know that one person has all the answers to everything in the city. It's not me. But I certainly believe that our city employees who are working day in and day out, for not great wages sometimes, are doing it because they love the city. A lot of them live here. A lot of them, it was their first job and they're entering into civil service and have continued to be lifelong city employees. So as a council member, I'm not going to sit up here and insult the people, the very people that we're expecting to do the work. I'm going to work collaboratively with them. I'm going to find out what else they need to do their job better. How do we support you? You seem to be struggling. This seems to be difficult for the department. What resources do you need for your department to do something better? And I'm going to continue to talk about people who support me because it's a broad base of people. And they're not downtown people. There are people. It's the Long Beach Area Chamber of Commerce. It's all of the hundreds of businesses that belong there want to work with me. Woo!
Okay, next question. Both of the candidates reside in the west portion of District 5. What will you do to ensure that the needs of the entire district, including the east side, are identified and supported? And Ian goes first.
It's about being present, and it's about actually caring about residents, not the downtown special interest. Now, my opponent can try to, slander me as attacking ordinary employees in the city, which is of course nonsense, because it's the powerful interests and it's the upper management in the city that are political actors, and they color everything according to a political agenda. They give the city council single option choices, and everything has to go with the downtown political agenda, which ultimately is taking resources away from not just our streets and our parks and our public safety and the homelessness crisis, but it's actually making it so that our regular workers, our refuse workers, people like that, they're paid less. It's the well-connected, those who are the most powerful unions that take away from the others. That's the kind of game that goes on in this city. And then people try to, run for office and act like, oh, we're just baddies, because we want accountability. We want honesty. We want to have somebody who's actually going to push back. Not being a rubber stamp and not acting like your whole role is just to go to city council and tell everybody how wonderful a job they're doing all the time. That's supposed to be your job. You're supposed to be the person who's representing the people, not the entrenched interests downtown. So, no, I'm not going to go there and just constantly compliment. I'm going to hold people accountable. I'm going to do it in a respectful way, but I'm going to be working for you every day.
So I believe the question was talking about the eastern and western portions of the district and how we're going to work so that both sides feel supported. It goes back to being in relationship with folks. My mother-in-law lived in Lakewood Village for 12 years. It was the first place she moved after she was in North Long Beach, where my husband was born and raised. My brother lives over by Patrick Henry, and another brother who lives in Bixby Highlands. It's about building relationships with people in different neighborhoods and being present to them when they have issues, and actually being present to them when they don't have issues, when they invite you to a block party, when they want you to come and celebrate Oktoberfest. It's being present because we know that policies are, yeah, these great big things, but they're the day-to-day things that everyone encounters when they walk outside their door. It's their streets, it's their sidewalks, it's their infrastructure, things that are deeply personal. As a school board member, I knew when a family didn't have a good day at school because I got a phone call. Because policy matters on the ground to people in very real and small ways. So we can talk about everything that's gone wrong. I'm gonna use one more, please. And we can talk about everything that was in the past. But we're here today to solve problems for today and to solve problems moving forward for young adults like my kids who live in this district, for kindergartners who are the class of 2035. What does Long Beach look like for them? The opportunity of this next council is to make good decisions, connecting people and families, so that the community that we build, east and west of the airport, is one 5th District community who feels responsible for each other's well-being, who feels invited and welcomed into each other's spaces, maybe in ways that they didn't have the opportunity to be welcomed in the past. That takes deliberate community building, which is done by working in relationship, by being kind, by being inclusive, seeing that everyone has a different story in this town and valuing it and bringing that story to the table. I'll do that.
SB 9 and 10 was recently passed by the state. SB 9 allows 4 units to be built on virtually all single-family residential properties in the state with no public input. SB 10 permits cities to pass an ordinance to allow a 4-story, 10-unit apartment complex on all single-family properties. Please state if you oppose or support these bills and why you have taken this position. We're going to start with Ms. Kirk.
So, SB 9 and 10, we've had a lot of conversations about that, and I'm really glad that you clarified that it's 4 units. It's 4 units if someone chooses to go the SB 9 route in this city. In the 2 years that SB 9 has passed, we have less than 5 people who have chosen that. And again, I will say, it's 4 units. So, I'm on the school board while SB 9 and SB 10 passed. Wasn't on the city council, wasn't working downtown. But I know, and you can check the record, the last time we were at this is about local control. As a school board member, the last thing I want someone to do in Sacramento is to make a decision for schools, whether it's school start times, which they did this year, which we fought vehemently in Sacramento, or telling us the specifics of how we need to do transportation. Those are local issues. So my experience is talking about local issues with Sacramento lawmakers and fighting. I've had an opportunity to do that as a school board member. I have accompanied Assemblymember O'Donnell to support some of his work. So it goes back to, we have to maintain local control, which SB 9 and SB 10, SB 10 has not taken away full local control. There are parts of SB 10 that do have a local control piece. So it's having relationships with the people making the laws in Sacramento, being able to call them up or text them and say, we have things to talk about in Long Beach because the bill that's on the table isn't good for us and here's why. So again, it's going back to relationships, being able to work with local and regional elected officials to make sure that we maintain local control to begin with. SB 9 allows for ADUs, which I know is another issue, and you know the story. My dad lived in the back house in my house. That's why we bought the house. After a heart attack and a brain injury that was debilitating, a hospital administrator went from the peak of his career to not remembering what he had for breakfast that day. Us having the option to have a back house was what we needed for our family to take care of a loved one. We also chose, by bringing my dad into this multi-generational family, my Nana lived with him. She was in her 80s. She lived with us till she was 100, and she passed at 101. My children grew up in a 4-generation household, and I grew up in a 3-generation household. That was the norm. But we squeezed into a teeny tiny house, and then we converted the garage into bedrooms so there was enough room for 4 kids, a grandma, and parents. SB 9 and ADUs allow for families to make choices that they need to make. There are protections for historic districts. You cannot use them. You have to live on site, and you can't use them as Airbnb. So there are protections in place. So less than 5 have chosen SB 9. There is a checklist that people have to qualify for, and the city is absolutely regulating it and keeping it safe for the people who live there and the neighbors around. And so we need to make the best of the situation that we don't have a choice over anymore and make sure the city is on top of the enforcement of those regulations.
Well, I'm clearly having some influence because after a year of talking about local control, my opponent is finally talking about local control just before the election, as the ballots are already arriving at people's homes. So I'm thrilled to hear that, but I'm not thrilled to hear that you do not seem to understand these laws at all. You just misstated several things. Your position seems to be evolving. I can't really tell what it is. The last Lakewood Village debate we had in the primary, you said you liked SB9. I can't tell now what your position is, but I can tell you don't understand the laws. They didn't come in 2 years ago. They came into effect this year. And SB9 is not an ADU law. SB9 is the law that just totally deregulates zoning throughout the state. It allows developers to do a lot split and put duplexes on each side. And then when you combine it with the existing ADU law, you can add another unit on each side. And then when you combine it with the existing junior ADU law, you can add yet another unit on each side, which gets you up to a maximum of 8 units. And now you're dealing with something similar to the cracker boxes that we had 30 years ago in this city. SB 10 is the law that makes it so you don't even have to have an environmental impact report on 10 units on the lot. So it's really important that you understand the issues. Having a big title is great, but if you don't understand the issues that have been important in this community that people have been campaigning, I campaigned against SB 9 was in the legislature. Our city council talked about opposing it, and did nothing. My first order of business would be to take advantage of the opportunity to have a regulatory ordinance under SB 9. That was negotiated into the law. We can have an ordinance that at least gives us some protection on parking standards, setbacks, things like that. And ultimately, we need to join the lawsuit, which is challenging this for charter cities.
Supersedes all other ordinances. I know this because I talked to development services and I asked for clarification. I asked to see the checklist. I have the information. At the last debate, at the last forum, you said it was 10 units, and now you're saying it's 8
Not
units.
true.
Okay. We could probably go back and check the tape.
Yep.
SB 9 supersedes all other ordinances. It does. That's 4.
Out of respect for the Long Beach City College employees that are generously giving up their overtime tonight, we're going to have to go to closing statements. So, let's see. Hey, did you start?
I started. No, I went second.
Yeah, I believe Paige should go first.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity again to be with you tonight. Thank you to the employees who are here, being of service to their school and to our community. I'm running to continue my lifelong service to my community. There's a record. You can check it. I love the work that I do every day. I ran as a parent who was engaged in doing the work on our school sites. And once I got the opportunity to help co-create policy with district staff before I was on the board, I knew that I wanted to continue the work. Because as I said before, policy changes lives. It can change it in great big ways, and it can change it in really small ways that make a huge difference for one kid or one family. I don't make policy to get credit. I don't make policy to get applause or cheers from a crowd. I make policy to make our community better. I do it to meet the needs of children and families across 4 cities, and I do it because I love the hard work of governing a large urban school district. Policy gets made in collaboration with the rest of an elected body. No one council member can make anything happen. It takes a minimum of 5 votes. Council members, like school board members, only have authority when acting as a deliberative body. I can sit up here and have every idea in the world. I have to bring people along in that idea. I have to work with staff to get the realities of making that happen. I know that that's true because I've been part of a deliberative body for 8 years. I've collaborated with my colleagues, with teachers, with parents, community members, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, and elected officials across the region to impact change for Long Beach Unified students and families and our greater community. I want to continue to do it as your council member. I have a proven track record of results of collaboration and service. The work requires professionalism, clear communication, tough conversations, and deep engagement with staff, with residents, with colleagues, with one of those 2 people who will be our next mayor who we're sitting up here. It takes more than just being cordial. It's about intentional relationship building for what's in the best interest of District 5. And D5 is a critically important district to this city. So I'm going to ask tonight humbly for your vote, and I'm going to ask you to reflect on who do you think can actually make those changes happen? Who has the capacity, the experience, the temperament to work with a new council and with a new mayor to pass the things.
Keep going, Megan, you're good. Keep going.
To pass the things that need to happen that are in the best interest of the 5th district. And we do it by being kind. And we do it by working in relationship, and I want to do that work with you.
It begins with being truthful. That's the fundamental question. Because everybody's going to tell you what you want to hear before the election. But who has the track record of fighting for the truth in this city? And who has the track record of being a rubber stamp for the establishment? They're still waiting for the air conditioning in Bancroft, here in Lakewood Village. My opponent is currently reaching into everybody's pockets for another school bond for the same work that was supposed to be gotten done with the last school bond. That's the problem. So I'm offering you someone who's going to value relationships, but no relationships more than with you, the residents who have real needs. I'm going to value you, your pocketbook, your tax dollars, and make sure it actually comes back out to serve you. It's a very clear choice in this race. It's a choice between the status quo and a change agent. So, if you're happy with the way things are, if you think things have actually gotten better in the last few years with regard to homelessness, with the increase of 62% just in the last count, and the enormous waste of money, which is so inhumane, then you should choose my opponent. If you want change, I'm offering you change. If you're happy with the status quo of air quality, a city where literally the air is carcinogenic, because we don't fight for our own interests. We don't go to the Air Quality Management District, where I would seek the position on that board, to fight for electrification of the port, to fight for the federal government. And if you're satisfied with our parks falling apart, with our trees dying, with a total lack of capital investment along the LA River, I'm a member of the River Park Coalition. We're fighting to expand park space. We're not just taking the talking points from City Hall. We're doing our own research. We have a 10-page report on all the sources of money that exist to acquire the park space along the LA River. It's been ignored by the city. If you're happy with the state of small business, where they have the highest sales tax, and we're not getting a return on the money, and businesses are going out of business left and right, and so many storefronts are being smashed along the Atlantic. And they feel helpless, like they have no police protection. If you feel like public safety is better than it was a few years ago, if you feel like we're better off having our 911 dispatch closed, Fire Station 9 in Bixby Knolls, and our Eastside Community Hospital closed, if you think all these things are getting better for us, then it's a clear choice for my opponent. But if you want change and progress, I'm here for you.
On behalf of Lakewood Village Neighborhood Association, I want to thank all of you for being here, an excellent audience. Long Beach City College, thank you for allowing us to be here. And to our candidates,